an organization called Candid. GuideStar has had a database of all the nonprofits in the United States for many years. And together, what we're trying to do is share the information you need to do good. We collect information on givers and information on how to get the word out about your nonprofit. I'm going to share briefly, and I want to thank SCORE for letting me do this. I'm going to share briefly a little bit about us. And then if you have any more questions about what I do, my email will be on the last slide, and you'll be able to reach out to me directly if you have a question, or to go to our website. What I'm going to share with you is a little bit about Foundation Directory. So a lot of people, when they are looking to find grants and beginning to write grants, are wondering where they can go to get those grants. Sometimes with new organizations, it's maybe a little too soon to get into Foundation Directory and do searching, but once you become more established, Foundation Directory is meant to be the key place where you can go to find information on the private givers. That's foundations, corporations, and charities that give money away all across the United States and indeed beyond the United States and throughout the world. What we do is try to collect that information and make it up to date. So the Foundation Directory tool, which I'll tell you where you can access it before the end of this, the Foundation Directory tool contains over 240,000 funders, information on over 2 million recipients, and we collect information on over 4 million grants each year that they're awarded. So what you get by going into it is detailed profiles of funders, grants, recipients, and companies. The reasoning being, if you're going to try and find out who's going to give you a grant, you want to know who's given grants before and where they've given and what they've given for. It's updated daily because we have a team that works to keep it up to date. And we bring the information not just from what's publicly available, not just websites, but all sorts of other sources, including direct reporting from grant makers who work with us to make sure they get the latest information out there about what's being done in the nonprofit world. I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a second and share my screen, which shows you Foundation Directory. So this is the database and what it looks like. And I'm going to just show you extremely briefly how you use it. But then I want you to tell you where you can access it and how you can get access to it. So this is Foundation Directory. When I search it, I often search and do it as an advanced search, meaning I search under the subject that my nonprofit is, and I search under the geographic focus, meaning where I serve. So I'll put Cuyahoga County, arts and culture. And sometimes I put in the population that I served, if it's specific to a particular age or gender or social economic status, people in poverty, for example. But all I need to do to use this is to search these terms. And what I wind up with is a list of funders. So just searching arts and culture in Cuyahoga County finds over 1,400 grant makers that have given over 27,000 grants since 2003. If we look at just the last 5 years or so, that gets a little bit shorter of a list, but not that much shorter, because there are so many givers in Greater Cleveland that you may not know about. This is organized in order by the ones that have given the most grants for this. And you can download this information, by the way, if you use this database at a remote location. And it tells you a profile of the funder. So for example, here's the George Gund Foundation, one of the biggest funders in Cleveland. It tells you where they give their money. It tells you details on who they've given their money to, how much they gave and what was it for. And then further down, it tells you how to apply to them and the kind of things that you need to do to assemble the information to apply. And certainly Anita is going to be telling you about the process of putting together a grant request. But if you are looking for identifying different funders that you could apply to, remember that this tool is available and it does enable you to do this research and then email it to yourself or print it out. Well, what I'm showing you here is the database. As I said, it's something that you can access at different places around the city. It's not free from home, unfortunately, because that's how we make our money. We sell access to it. However, it is free at a number of different locations. So if I go to candid.org, which is our main website, and I go up here to Candid at a Glance, and do the drop down, it says find us in your community. And all I have to do is type in a zip code. And when you do that, you get a list of who are the different organizations that partner with Candid and offer free access to this particular tool. So Foundation Directory is the tool, and in order to get free access to it, you can visit any of these listings, and I'm just taking a little bit of time to come up here, but it's going to come up with a map and a listing of the closest locations to the 44126 area, zip code area. I can tell you, it's coming up a little slowly, but I can tell you, here it is, that Westlake Porter Public Library, the Berea branch, the County Library, the North Ridgeville branch of Lorraine Public Library, the Main Library of Cleveland Public, Cleveland Heights, University Heights Library, and many others are places where you can go and use this database for free. You have to go in, talk to the reference desk, and they'll set you up. And also they have people there that are trained to help you use it. The other thing is, the last slide will have my email address. So I'm happy to set up appointments with people who want to learn how to use this tool. And you can reach out to me and we'll see about setting one of those up, either at one of those locations or at our headquarters, which is down in the Midtown Tech Hive downtown. One other thing I want to tell you before I finish is that this database is something that you can subscribe to or use at these locations. But if you are a 501c3 nonprofit and you are under $1 million in revenue or income, you can go to guidestar.org, which is part of Candid as well. Guidestar.org is the listing of all the nonprofits in the United States. And you can go in there and update your nonprofit profile. Every nonprofit that's a 501c3 is in the United States is available here. If you want to update your nonprofit profile, you can simply click on this and get permission to do so. You can look for your organization and find it. And this is going to allow me to get into an imaginary organization called Bright Star for Good. This enables you to share detailed information on who you are with the world. People that use guidestar.org are places like Facebook, that when you have a Facebook fundraiser, they have to pull information on nonprofits from somewhere. They pull it from GuideStar. Similarly, donor advised fund givers like Fidelity use GuideStar to research who to give to. So if you want to update your information on here, there's a clear pathway on how to do it. You can go in here, find your profile, get permission to update it. And if you earn a gold seal, so you go through and you update these different levels, seals of transparency. I'm saying this really quickly, but there's a lot of explanation available on the GuideStar website. If you go in here and get a gold seal of transparency, that makes you eligible, if you're a small nonprofit under $1 million in revenue, to get 1 year of Foundation Directory for free. It's called the Go for Gold program, and it's something that we've been working on and making sure that the people that are smaller organizations that can't afford to subscribe to us can get access to Foundation Directory. So that's what I wanted to tell you about. I know that's a lot of information in a short amount of time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can go back to the final slides. The database is for nonprofits when looking for Foundation Directory, but anyone can use it to search for funders all across the country, not just in Ohio. I mentioned the places where you can go, and I'm going to go back to resume the slideshow here. Mention the places that you can go to access Foundation Directory. Remember that you can go to candid.org, find us, and put in your zip code and find out where nearby there's a funder. Or you can go to GuideStar, get a gold seal of transparency, and get free access to Foundation Directory as well. Happy to talk to you more about it offline. You can send me an email, and Anita will share this information with you so you have it. But that's my email there if you want to write it me. david.holmes@candid.org. I work in the Cleveland area and I work through the downtown. So I'm happy to set up a time to meet with you. All right. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming and showing us. I I always learn something new, even I've listened to this a few times, but still new information. So I really appreciate it. And
Well, it's my pleasure. And thank you all so much for having me, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Okay. And now we'll get on to the grant writing, but I think for if you're searching for grants, that database is phenomenal, and it's well worth taking the time to find a place where you can access it for free. Or if you are a nonprofit, go ahead and fill out your profile so that you can get free access. That would be wonderful. So I'm going to give you a little commercial for SCORE again. Our mission is to foster vibrant small business communities. We do this through mentoring and education so that any small business owner has the opportunity to access resources that will help make you successful. So we're all volunteers. We all feel that we're not successful unless we help you be successful. We're the largest network of free volunteers for small business mentors in the nation. So we have a mentor for whatever your business is. And if we in the Cleveland chapter can't help you, we have access to those 10,000 other SCORE mentors across the United States that we can match you up with. So don't hesitate. If you have an unusual business, we'll find somebody who can help you. So we do mentoring, still mostly remote. We do webinars like this one, and one of our greatest assets is our website. And please go to the website when you have an opportunity, and I'll give you a shot of it. But there are so many resources there, tools and templates that will help you get started, links to recorded webinars, a list of all the upcoming free live webinars. So give it a view. Our work is supported both by the Small Business Administration and by any number of businesses in the Cleveland area who really want to support you as small business owners. Here's a snapshot of our website. If you go here, you can click on Find a Mentor, and that will open up a small form. If you give us clear information about what your business is, it will help us match you up with a mentor who's more suited to help you. You can, again, look at the list of upcoming webinars, or you can view recorded webinars. And then in the library, there are all kinds of tools and templates that will help you. So give a look when you have an opportunity. So what happened with my, oh, I clicked on the website. So let me try to close that out. And go back and start over with my, here we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about grant writing basics tonight. And by the end of the session, I hope you will have an opportunity to find out where to find grant opportunities. You'll know how to search for and determine your eligibility. Also to understand an approach on how writing a grant application and what sorts of things you might include in your application. So where do you find grant opportunities? Well, you just saw David's presentation, which is a wonderful place, again, to search for grant opportunities. But you might also have board members who have links to organizations that provide grants. Perhaps they've worked at a bank or someplace that has a foundation, and they might have an in as far as helping you get a grant. You can also search on Google. Many local organizations have foundations. You can go, say, to Key Bank instead of their bank website, go to their Key Bank Foundation website. And many of the businesses in Cleveland and in the region have a foundation that does give out small grants. So again, candid. And if you're looking at federal grants, the place to go is grants.gov, because 26 different agencies in the government post on that grants.gov. So these, if you're interested in Ohio grants by the state, here's a link to those. Not only grants, but they have low interest rate loans and various types of tax incentives. Again, they're specific to Ohio. There's a link to the city of Cleveland and also to Cuyahoga County. So the interesting thing about Ohio, Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County is that they get boluses of money from time to time, and they will then initiate a grant opportunity. So you have to keep checking back, because once the money's gone, the grant no longer exists, but another one might come along. So if you check periodically these different websites, you may find a grant opportunity that will be useful to you. So eligibility, there are two keys to eligibility. One is, are you eligible for the program? Again, if we're talking about federal grants, you have to have a DUNS number, and here's a link to register for a DUNS number. And you also have to register in SAM. Those are the first two things that you have to do prior to applying for any kind of government grant. Private foundations do also have eligibility, and they will tell you in their announcement who's going to be eligible. And some of them are very specific. You have to perhaps have worked for a certain company, or you might be confined to a very specific region, or very specific target populations. So again, when you read the announcement, you should be able to tell if you are eligible. So if you don't know for sure, contact the program director in the request for application. And usually those people are very helpful. So the legal eligibilities, as opposed to the program eligibilities, may be different. It might be only available to a specific type of organization or size, depending on the type of funding agency. So if you're looking at federal grants in particular, they are generally very detailed about what organizations are eligible and ineligible. Local foundations generally require a 501c3. Also, most federal grants do, unless they state otherwise. Keep in mind, if you're starting out, it's very hard to get a grant. And that's because they want to fund organizations that they know are going to be around in the future and that have a track record. Hard to have a track record if you haven't really started yet. So If you don't meet the eligibility requirements, there is no point in applying, and don't waste your time. But if you are in doubt, contact the program director. Especially the federal grants, the program directors are, again, generally very helpful. Private foundations may or may not list a contact person, but if they do, that's a person that you should contact if you have any questions. So in general, they want to know what kind of track record you have. So they expect you've been in business long enough to be able to show some success in pursuing your mission. So what have you accomplished? If you're just starting a nonprofit and you don't have any key performance measures identified, sit down and think about what you're doing and how you're going to measure it, and how you're going to be able to tell people, I know I'm successful because I'm measuring these specific things. Also, you have to be very specific about how you're going to use the money. So don't think you can just ask for a pot of money. You have to have a very specific program, well-defined, and with a very clear budget. So have your business plan available. That's going to help you more than anything else. A grant application in many ways is like a business plan. So particularly a financial plan is essential. Now, SCORE members are more than happy to help you with your business plan and your financial plan. So you only want to apply for grants that support your strategic and business plan. So when you're looking for grants, don't think, well, that grant is different from what I was planning, but maybe I can do something like that so that I can get that grant. Don't try to change your mission just so you can get money. Don't change your target population. You know, if you have a good business plan and you have everything laid out, keep that solid. Look for funds that will support what you have in mind to do. Don't change what you want to do in order to get money. So private foundations are probably where most of you are going to be looking. They give grants that support your mission if your mission is consistent with their funding initiatives. They also often give charitable donations that will support a one-time project. So think about, am I looking for a grant that is going to support my program on an ongoing basis and help me build my program? Or am I looking for a charitable donation for a one-time gift that will solve one problem? So what do private grantors expect? So this is taken directly out of a grant application or announcement. As a corporate neighbor, our focus is on neighbors, education, and workforce, with an emphasis on racial, economic, and environmental equity. So this actually is a pretty broad statement. So if you have a project that's focusing on your neighborhood and has to do with education, and maybe it's helping people get jobs, you know, training people, they would support that. If you're helping low-income teenagers develop skills that might make them employable. if you're developing programs to educate preschoolers or elementary schools, whatever, you can apply for funding for those specifics, because the private grants are not telling you exactly what you have to do. They're asking you, tell us about what you're doing within this sphere. So most, again, only fund nonprofit organizations that have a 501c3. So they have to be organizations that are formed in the US, usually in their region or their service area. So the contents of, again, these are private applications. They want your mission statement, a background summary, an operating budget. Sounds very much like a business plan to me. Any members of their organization on your board. They want the title of your project. How much money are you asking for? Within that, what type of support are you asking for? Operation, program, capital, and then a description of your project. So again, these are all online applications, but you can upload a description of your project. So you're not just limited to, although some of them do limit you to 250 words, the space that's available in the application, but many of them will allow you to upload a file and you can give more detail on what you're trying to do. Of course, they want to know when your project is going to start and end. So the contents, they want to know, again, where are you going to provide the services? What are the anticipated number of individuals that you will serve? And try to be realistic, because if you say we're going to serve 100 people and you end up serving 10, then your chances of getting any funding in the future will be severely limited. So if you say you're going to serve 10 and you serve 20, that looks much better. They want to know, what is the impact of your program? How are you making a difference, again, for the community, the neighborhood, in education, workforce development? How are you making a difference? They want detail of your budgets, particularly how are you going to use the funds? They want to know what other organizations are providing funds to you. They don't want to be the sole source. They want to know that if their funding ends, that's not going to wipe out your organization, that you have other sources of funds that are going to support you and keep you going. So, and how much you're getting from others. So if you don't have other grants, you might say, we're applying for grants to these organizations for this amount of money, which makes them understand that you're not counting on them solely for supporting your organization. So again, here's where your business plan comes in handy, because if you've done a business plan, all of these questions will be easily answered. You can cut and paste from your business plan. So they want to know the primary geographic area served. And again, many of the private grants either limit to certain counties or metropolitan statistical areas or regions such as Northeast Ohio, Cuyahoga and Lake County. Are you providing services to a particular gender, male or female? Are you serving individuals with disabilities, etc.? So they want to know, what is it you're going to do and for whom? And they want to know the current health status of your organization. So is your organization solid? They want to know how many staff do you have? How long have you been in operations? What's your operating budget? Some of them are asking, how have you been impacted by COVID-19 and what have you done about it? Do you have a mission statement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion? If not, do you have a strategy regarding those? And do you have plans to implement that strategy? Some of them are going to ask, does your organization have an environment sustainability strategy? Have you given any thought to it? You know, this is something you should think about, and at least be able to make a statement that comes from the support of your board. So it's something you should discuss with your board. You know, you might say, our organization has no impact on the environment, and therefore we have not developed a strategy, but you need to address it in some way. Some of them want to know, what are you doing to impact positively climate change? Have you thought about that? They want a list of your board and your staff members. They want a copy of your IRS determination letter, your 990, and your most recent audited financials. Now, if you've been in business for less than 3 years and you do have audited financials, you might find that it's possible to get a grant sooner than 3 years. But in general, most organizations are looking for 3 years of operations in order to provide funding. Again, I put in the chat that you'll get a copy of both Dave's slides and mine, as well as a link to the recording, which includes both Dave's and my presentation. So now let's talk about government grants. And again, most of you, if you're just starting out, are probably going to go for private grants because those are much easier to get. But there may be instances where a government grant fits your mission. Now, one of the main differences between the government grant and the private foundations is, as I said, the private foundation doesn't say, here's what you have to do. They say, we want your program to be within this range and address these issues. Government grants, on the other hand, say, here's a program that we want to implement. And they give you very clear parameters on what that program should entail and what the accomplishments should be. So when you read a grant application from the government, read it pretty carefully, because you want to know if you're really eligible. They describe the program. You need to think about, is this a program that we can accomplish? Do we have the staff, the resources, etc., that we need in order to accomplish that program? Is it worth your effort? If you look at it and you say, well, you know, I have a very small staff, and if I do this project, it's going to take all of those people away from the work that they're currently doing. On the other hand, if this is a project that really fits within your mission, you can put additional people in that budget to help you accomplish the effort. So part of your budget is going to be the staff, the program staff, to carry out that program. Do you have the fiscal infrastructure to meeting the financial reporting requirements? Now, again, in SAM, in general, you have to draw down the money. If it's approved, you have to submit invoices and draw down the money electronically. Are you capable of doing that? And they want very detailed financial information on how you've spent the money. They want to know that you spent it exactly the way you portrayed it in your budget proposal. So if you're going to make any significant changes, you need to let the grant officers responsible for monitoring your grant know that you're reallocating budget because of something that has come up. So they're much more detailed and involved in what you're doing than the private grants. So government grants are difficult. They're very competitive. It's unusual to get approval with the first application. It's better to start with local or regional private foundations that give you more latitude and again are not so constrained as to how you use your money. Okay, so if you've decided to go ahead with a government grant, you have to decide how are you going to implement the project. And again, very, very important. How are you going to measure the quality of your work? How are you going to measure the output? What goals of the funding agency do the project fulfill? Can you meet the application for submission of the, meet the deadline for submission of the application? And if you go to the grants.gov, you'll find some of the announcements give you quite a bit of time, several months anyway. Others might be shorter. But the interesting thing is it takes a long time to get the money once you've submitted the application. So in the application, they might tell you that a letter of intent is required. And the reason they do that is they want to know how many applications they're going to get because they do peer review on the applications. And that means they have to go out and recruit reviewers from people who do work similar to you. And that takes them some time. So they want to know how many applications are they going to get so they know how many reviewers they have to recruit. Now, there are some organizations, including private organizations, that want you to submit an LOI, and then they will decide whether you can submit an application. So in the letter of intent, you want to say, we are going to apply for this specific grant. We are asking for X number of dollars to support and some relatively broad but comprehensive description of what your program is and what you're going to do. So what goes into the application? Again, if you have a business plan, a lot of times you can just cut and paste from the business plan into the grant application. Things like the description of your organization, what are your past performance statistics, your job descriptions, your financial data. All of those things are going to be in your business plan. So if you have a SCORE mentor, they're happy to help you with that information. So they want to know, what are your goals and objectives? Are they aligned with the agency objectives? What are you going to do to satisfy the need? How are you going to carry it out? What's the impact? And how are you evaluating what you're doing? Again, how are you measuring your success? What resources do you have available to support the application? They don't want to give you everything you need to start from scratch. They're going to assume that you have a certain level of support for the project. And then they want a budget. So my approach has always been, I take the grant announcement, identify what are the objectives of the granting agency, and try to determine how are my objectives relate to their objectives. And I usually try to make my objectives as close to the objectives of the grant announcement as possible. So this is an example. Actually, it's an old grant that we applied for years ago, but the idea and the announcement was to support access of low income or disadvantaged women to high quality screening for breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer. Second objective, to assure early detection and treatment. The third is to educate people about prevention, treatment, and follow-up. So again, aligning objectives is really critical. As I said, the private grantors generally have objectives that support specific things in the community: low income demographics, economic development, educational opportunities. So you want to see that you fit into one of those objectives. But your purpose or your specific aims, they might call, if it's a federal grant, they call them usually specific aims. Local ones usually say your purpose or objectives. But this actually details what you're going to do to respond to the objectives of the grant. So again, try to relate your objectives to those that are in the grant. So again, if you go back, their objective was to improve access to screening for breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer. I'm saying my objective is to improve access to excellent screening for breast, cervical, and ovarian cancer by establishing a mobile screening van that will visit areas where low income or disadvantaged women reside. So I'm taking that into the community. So we'll have all the equipment we need to do the screening. We're going to try to get there when it's most convenient for local residents. So we might go in the evening, on the weekends, times that we know they're going to be available. So to raise awareness, I'm going to say we're going to do newspaper, radio, TV, public service announcements, and so forth. Today, which is a few years later, I'm probably going to do a lot of social media blitzing as well. And then I'm going to present local workshops and seminars to educate women. And I'll probably do them as webinars. I'll put information on my website, on the social media, trying to get as much information out that will educate women on how to prevent breast cancer. There are things that they can do as far as diet, exercise, etc., and get regular screening, and then follow-up care. So if we applied to the federal government with that grant application, and they turned us down, we could use the same application to qualify for a local or regional grant. So don't think that all is lost if you apply for a grant and it doesn't come through. There are other granting agencies that will honor the same application. So you can apply to as many places as you want or as you're able to. And if more than one comes through, you may be able to accept both of them as long as they don't overlap. So if you can use, say you have a project that's going to cost $30,000 and you can get 10,000 from one grantor and 20 from another, they're not going to overlap. So you could use them both. So then again, for the federal grants, the bulk of your application is going to be, how are you actually going to do what you say you're going to do? So what are the specific tasks? Who's going to be involved? Demonstrate that you really understand the work involved and that you've done something similar and you've been successful at it. When I used to do grant reviews for the NIH, one of the things that became obvious with some applications is that the applicant really did not understand how much work had to be done to carry out that project. And they didn't put in enough staffing or enough resources and so forth. So you have to really be comprehensive, detailed, and make sure that you're doing, asking for enough to actually do the project. Don't sell yourself short. So private applications generally do require much less detail than the government grants. But understanding the implementation details are just as important. Again, how are you going to do it? It's not just enough to say, I'm going to do this. You've got to think through, how is it going to work? How am I going to actually do it? Do I have to take people from what they're doing now to do that job? If so, can I hire in somebody to fill their spot? And what about training? So there's a lot of effort involved in applying for a grant. Okay, so outline for either the private or the government application should be pretty much the same, but the detail will be dictated by the grantor. And again, in general, the private ones require less. So if I talk about how am I going to do the project for this project for screening, etc., I have to think about what equipment and material would I use? Do I have those or do they need to be developed? If so, who's going to do it? These things don't just appear out of thin air. Somebody has to sit down and develop these materials. Who has the time to do it? Do I have to hire somebody? These are things you have to think about. How will I recruit clients or accomplish the grant's goal? Now, I may project again that I'm going to see 100 clients a month. And that's fine, but then I have to figure out, how am I going to recruit them? What am I going to do? If I'm using social media, if I'm using cold calling, maybe I'm going to go out and talk to community groups. But you have to figure, if I talk to 10 people, how many of those are actually going to be willing to participate in my research study or my program or whatever. So unless you have people lined up waiting for you to start your program, you need to think very seriously about how am I going to recruit people to do that. And again, I can tell you, after many years in doing clinical research, that getting clients or getting patients to participate, particularly if it requires them to do something different from what they had in mind, is a real challenge. And you have to be good at convincing them that what you want them to do is the right thing. So now, again, who's going to present material if I'm going to train people or educate them? Who's going to do that? What kind of materials do I need? Over what time frame am I going to be doing this? These are all things that you need to think about. Again, do you have adequate staff or do you need to recruit? If you recruit, to be sure that an individual is available and trained for the project. So my approach would be, if I had a fairly good idea that we're going to get a grant, I would interview people before we found out if we were going to be funded or not, and say, if we are funded, I will hire you the minute we get the notice that we receive funding. So I would have them ready, but understood that I needed to get the money before I could hire them. So then where are you going to do the training? What do you have, space and equipment? Is there going to be a cost? So all of these details need to be thought through. So when you build your budget, you have enough money to support all of these things that you're going to have to do. And then when is the project going to be complete? If you have an ongoing project, is it going to be done within the time frame of the award? In general, most granting organizations will fund you for 1 year for sure, and funding for subsequent years, if they say initially, like the government says it's up to 5 years, they will guarantee you the first year, but based on your project report, your progress report, they might withdraw if they don't feel that you're making adequate progress. So you need to really be geared up front to be ready to get going when you hear about the funding. So again, budgeting is the most critical piece of the project. You want to list all the people involved in the project, what their time allocation and salary benefits. You want to include salary increases. I would generally just put a job description for that person in the appendix. They don't limit the space usually for the appendix, where they do limit the page numbers or the space that you have to describe your project or justify your budget, but you can put job descriptions in the appendix. You want to list all the equipment and supplies. And then if you have to rent additional space, that should go in. Are you going to have to travel? If so, if I'm going to take a van out, I'm going to use mileage. I probably won't do hotels and meals, but there are projects where you might have to. If you're traveling distances to visit clients, you might need hotel or meals. And again, when I was working in clinical research and we applied for grants, we had to go to the National Cancer Institute periodically to meet. So we would put the hotel and the mileage or airfare in the budget to cover it. Otherwise, we'd end up paying for it ourselves. And in general, you have to provide a justification. Again, the more information you can give, the easier it will be for the people who are reviewing the grants to understand what you're trying to do, and it makes it easier for them to approve it. So you would list, again, the people, their salaries, benefits, if they're working at 12 months, 9 months, what part, and how much their total salary would be. And then in the budget justification, you might say, you know, John will be the project leader. He does all of these things. And Ms. Smith is responsible for managing the van screening process. And then you can put job descriptions again in the appendix. So then the question comes up, should I hire a grant writer? And experienced grant writers can be an asset. They know how to write the application, but they might not know enough about your organization. And that's the critical piece. Also, they might be expensive and the cost will not be covered by the grant. So even if you hire a grant writer, keep in mind you're responsible for the project. So if your grant writer tends to be a little bit creative and put things in there that you're not able to carry out, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to be able to carry out everything that's promised in the proposal. In-house proposals often can be successful, and especially if you're applying for local grants, you're much better off to try to do them yourself using your business plan, because they don't generally give huge amounts of money. You don't want to spend money on a grant writer if you don't have to. Okay, how do we look for companies that offer grants other than the government organization? Again, that's what David's database, the Candid database that he described, that's where you should go to look at what's available. So anyway, so your staff usually knows more about what you are capable of doing and not capable of doing. So you can call on them to write parts of the application, or again, work with the SCORE mentor to build your business plan that you can then use to fill in your grant application. Then know who's going to be evaluating your application. The NIH and other agencies of the federal government publish who's on the review committee. So you can go and look and find out exactly who's doing it, where what their background is, where they're from. Probably not wise to try to contact them, but maybe wise to find out what their specialty is, so that maybe you can be a little clearer, make it easier for them to review the application. Foundations sometimes have a review committee and sometimes they don't. It's hard to tell. Check their website if they do provide those names. Sometimes you're not really sure who gives you the money if you're in a private foundation. That's why it's very helpful, especially for local foundations, if you know somebody, or maybe your board members know somebody who works in the organization who can give a little push to help you out. Again, put yourself in the place of the reviewer. What would you be looking for? The easier it is for the reviewer to see that your proposals align with the goals of the agency, the better she will be able to rate it. So going back to that application where I'm doing the breast cancer, if I were reviewing that as a reviewer, I would look and say, well, gee, their objectives align exactly with the announcement, so they're doing all the right things. Now, have they put in enough staffing to do what does it look like they really understand what's needed? And so if they are, then I'm more likely to approve the application. I will point out that when it comes to budgeting, don't think because you have the lowest budget request, you have the highest chance of getting a grant. Because the reviewers don't look at the budget to say they look at the budget to see if it's realistic for the work that's being done. So they're not trying to make it as low as possible. They're trying just to be realistic. So to be successful, don't propose objectives that you can't do. If you can't do them during the grant period, don't include them. Be organized. If you're very logical about the description of your project, again, it makes it easier for the reviewer. You want to be clear. Don't use a lot of jargon. Those 3-letter acronyms mean different things for different disciplines. So if you use one, spell it out the first time you use it so people know what it is. Help the reviewer as much as possible to understand what you're trying to accomplish. So edit your grant application, but ask for help. Have other people review it. Does it make sense to them? Sometimes you're so familiar with what you're working on that you leave out things that are really necessary for other people to understand what you're trying to do. So even have somebody who's outside your organization who doesn't know what you're doing review it just for clarity and fluidity and understanding. Then go and evaluate the proposal based on the review criteria. And in federal grants, they identify specifically what their review criteria are. So if the format, well, most of the grant applications now are all online, so you really don't have much choice. But if there's a page limit, don't exceed it. And they will generally cut it off when you reach the word limit. So if you have to submit things, the determination letter, etc., make sure that you do. Also make sure that you beat the deadline. If you go past the deadline, that's the easiest way for the granting organization to, they don't even look at it. They'll just say you didn't meet the deadline, sorry, we'll put that in the rejected pile. So don't think you have leeway, you don't. So again, if you have questions, contact the program director. Again, they usually want to help you. Again, be accurate, don't use jargon. If you're working with other organizations or agencies, and sometimes you have a better chance of getting a grant if you work with some other organizations, or if you can get them to refer clients to you or help you in some way. Maybe you're missing a piece of what you need to have, but there's another organization that can provide that. Get a budget for them and include it in your grant, and then also include a letter from them saying, we're so excited about the opportunity to participate with you in this grant. We are going to do blah, blah, blah. That goes a long way, believe it or not. the reviewers want to see things like that, to know that you've got the support of other agencies that you might work with. So the cycle is that the agencies develop the program announcement, they publish it, you file your application, they announce the awards, and then the funding is initiated. So there are different time frames. The government, generally, you submit an application. It takes about 10 months until you know if you're going to be funded or not. Private grants, sometimes during COVID, say the Cleveland Foundation was using monthly reviews and quarterly reviews, depending on the size of the application. But usually they're much shorter and quicker turnaround. Again, the process for the government grant is very regimented. Private grants, sometimes you really don't know. But these are the review criteria that the government uses for their grants. So it's the significance. Does the project address an important problem? Do the individuals have appropriate education, training, and experience? That's very important. Does the project bring anything new? Does the approach seem appropriate for the project? Does it seem like it has the potential for success? And does the environment provide support for the project? And that means, for instance, when I put in the application for that mobile van, I was working at a hospital where they had all the resources and so forth to support that. That's what that means by the environment. So don't be discouraged, again, if your grant is not approved the first time. Read the commentary of the reviewers. Now, again, for federal grants, you will get a summary of the reviewers' comments. And if you address those, you can reapply. Put in the same application, but addressing those shortcomings that were identified during the initial grant review. So you have a better chance of being approved the second round. So you want to resubmit it. And then again, submit it to other funding agencies. There's no reason why you can't. You can use the same application to as many organizations that you think you fit. So again, fail just means the first attempt in learning. We all go through it. We all fail. You know, when you write grants, you have to realize that a lot of them aren't going to be successful, but that shouldn't discourage you. If you have a good project, somebody's going to review it and appreciate it and give you funding. So I think we're done. Let's see, any questions? Okay. I think I already answered the question about looking for companies. Please use the Candid database. Find out where there's a library close to you where you can use it for free, or go into GuideStar and fill out your profile so that you qualify for free use for a year. The reason you might use a zip code to find a foundation is because a lot of them fund nonprofits in their area. So you want to find, you want to find somebody who's likely to look at what you want to do. grants for crime under the government, are they in a certain category? That I don't know. I think you'd have to look at, go to grants.gov if you're looking, or to the Ohio website, Cleveland City website, or Cuyahoga County. And I have put all of those in the slides, and you will be getting a copy of the slides. And those are all live links, so they will take you directly to the website for that organization. So thank you all for attending. I'm sorry I ran so long, but I hope you found it useful. If you have questions, feel free to contact me. I do encourage you again to work with a SCORE mentor. Let's see if we are anyway. Let's see. Okay, I think I have a hard time to answer when they ask how my company supports a community. What they are looking for is what impact, what's the population that you're working with? I mean, you're working with people in your community. If you're a nonprofit, probably something you're doing is helping people in the community. That's what they want to know. What's the impact in the community? Are you providing services to somebody that in your community? I don't know what you're doing, but in general, a nonprofit is going to be providing some sort of services to people in the community. That's what they're looking for. So, okay, I think that's it. And again, thank you very much for coming and spending an hour, more than an hour. And I hope that it's been useful to you. And I also hope that you will enjoy the rest of your evening and look forward to seeing you again.